in the news a lot recently, and that is, of course, the issue of dangerous dogs. Nick, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
We've seen two awful cases recently. The one down in Surrey where the dog walker was attacked by at least 6 or 7 of the 8 dogs that she was walking. Nobody's really quite sure exactly why that happened, but it did happen. It resulted in her very tragic death. We saw just the other day another case of Milton Keynes where a dog savaged a young 4-year-old girl who's also now dead. People are saying to me that there's a problem with ownership. There's a problem with people who got dogs during the lockdown don't really know what to do with them now. It's clearly not just a problem of a particular breed of dog, is it?
No, the problem's always the other end of the lead.
Yeah.
And that's something the government needs to be clear about. I think the difficulty is childminders need to be licensed. If you're going to have a boarding kennel, you need to have a license. But the amazing thing is, if you want to walk dogs professionally, certain councils say you can have a license if you want to and you can pay for it and that will include insurance, but it's not mandatory. And so many councils say, well, if you're going to have a license, you'll have 6 dogs or 4 dogs. But why would you take a license out unless it's mandatory? And this particular instance you referred to, a tragic case, the lady was walking 8 dogs, one of which was 2 very large dogs, a German Shepherd. So my suggestion is that there needs to be regulation, there needs to be control. This is, if you look at the statistics, the dog attacks on other animals and on people is rising year on year. So what I'm suggesting is that the government take hold of this and make the licensing system mandatory so that people can't opt and say, yes, I'm going to take a license, no, I'm not. It's going to be a mandatory requirement, and you're not just given a license. You actually have to pass a proficiency test. Because if you think about it, when you're looking after dogs, it's potentially very dangerous. You need to know how to interact with them. If they're aggressive, how would you deal with it? So I'm suggesting basically, like you have a driving test, a test for people who are professionally going to look after animals. Yeah. So that when they do walk them, they're limited. And my suggestion is it's 3 dogs. I think that's a reasonable amount. Because they have to be able to cope. If another dog is off the lead and comes over and attacks, then it's all, you've got the pack instinct. There needs to be compulsory insurance, which will be included in the licensing fee. And the system basically just needs to be regulated. It needs to be taken control of so that this particular type of tragedy doesn't happen again. I would also suggest that anyone who has a dog has to have a license because, as you rightly pointed out, many people during lockdown have got dogs, they've got no experience, they don't understand them, and it really is a very complex situation which potentially has very serious ramifications. And I think the other point to bear in mind is people during lockdown have suffered serious mental health issues. Many people have been affected by this, and of course, if people with mental health issues are trying to look after animals, that's going to transmit to the animal, and they're going to be affected, and they're not necessarily going to behave in a normal way either. No. So, in short, Mike, what I'm suggesting is let's have some regulation, let's have the government take control, mandatory requirement, 3 dogs, proficiency test, training, compulsory insurance, and let's see if we can start turning these statistics round on their head and making it safer, making more responsibility, more accountability. Yeah.
Because I've spoken to a few sort of, experts in dogs over the course of the last few weeks, and they're not quite agreed on whether or not the dog licence was a good thing, whether it should come back. One of the reasons it was done away with, effectively, was because nobody was kind of paying any attention to it. And we both know, probably, that, there are several ways of getting a dog. You can get it through a legal breeder, you can get it through proper means, or you can probably get it through nefarious means. And we know there are people who smuggle puppies into the country. It's a very sort of, I would say, fast and loose business, because people will pay a lot of money for dogs. I mean, do you think there's any point in bringing back a kind of a dog licence, as it were?
I do. I think dogs need to be microchipped. I think we need to have dog wardens. And, if these are run by local councils, there's a financial incentive to enforce it, because what I would suggest is that if you're caught walking a dog and you don't have a licence, then you have an on-the-spot fine of, let's say, £300 or something of that sort. So once you say to councils, look, we're going to incentivise you to enforce this mandatory legislation, yes. You can bet your bottom dollar they will do.
I can't believe what I'm hearing, Nick. I can't believe you're actually actively encouraging the councils to have some more penalty notices they can hand out.
Well, it seems to work. This is a really dangerous situation. Yeah. It's happening. What we hear about in the media is the tip of the iceberg. Dog attacks happen on a daily basis. So we need, and a lot of people are very innocent. They're walking the dog's under control. A big dog, out of control, bounds over off the lead and attacks your dog. The serious injuries, vet fees, etc., or you might be attacked trying to break it up. So it's just a case of making society take responsibility. Yeah. And yes, let the councils do their best. And this is something that there should be dog wardens. And I think it would have a massive impact. It would improve it for people who are genuine about loving dogs and looking after them. They will comply. And people who don't, they will pay penalties and probably have their dogs at risk being confiscated.
Yeah. I know you spent some time in France. I mean, do they do things differently in Europe? Do they have a different sort of set of rules for... I know they're much more dog-friendly in France. You can take your dog into most restaurants. You can sort of disappear off into all sorts of places that where in Britain they'd be banned. Have they got a more sort of sensible attitude?
I think it's a more inclusive attitude. I mean, my last dog was a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, which in fact was French. And whenever you go to a restaurant, you take it anywhere, the first thing they do is bring out a bowl for the dog and a snack for the dog before pay attention. So it's a completely different scenario. It's much more inclusive. Here we've got beaches, you can't take them. Restaurants, pubs, can't take them. That also needs to change. We're living in an inclusive society now. I don't see why dogs can't be part of that. But yes, they I think they're just more responsible. They're more connected with their animals than some people are in this country. You have a lot of dangerous dogs in small gardens that are not exercised, not trained. And then we wonder why we have these tragic accidents where young children are left alone with the dog for a short, takes a second. It should never happen. No. I don't think it happens so often in France because it's more regulated. The exact extent of the regulation, I don't know.
No, absolutely right. Well, surely something will be done because there has just been too many of these incidents of late, and it's really, really tragic to see them happening time and time again. And just before I let you go, Nick, an interesting a little piece came across my desk last night as I was just sort of reading some stuff. You decided to enter your foot into the Prince Andrew fray, which I was quite surprised about. You're suggesting he shouldn't go and try and unravel his settlement, which is probably good advice.
Well, his lawyers have advised him, this is the evidence, this is your reputation, this is what you need to do on a voluntary basis to get rid of this case. And this case was hanging over him and the royal family for quite a long time. They've taken the view, we think the money's about £10 million. We're not sure exactly who's paid it, but it's done and dusted. It's a sealed, binding deal. The deal was, you pay the money, you won't be prosecuted. Upon what basis do you sensibly say to someone, well, let's now try and unravel it? I know the US lawyer who was falsely accused, and I'm not making any comment about Andrew, he's encouraging him to do it, but each case falls on its own facts. And, I would have thought Prince Andrew is best advised, don't go near it. I mean, apart from enormous expense, the publicity will be horrendous. You're only a can of worms. It's gone now. Your reputation is tarnished. The best chance you've got of moving on with your life is actually doing some good and leaving that alone, because there's no good going to come out of that at all. Absolutely not.
But one other incredible, if true, sort of revelation from the deal that was done is that she was only given the money with a sort of an assurance that she would stop talking about it for a year, as opposed to like forever. Yeah. I mean, have you ever heard of anything like that? I can't imagine you would negotiate that.
No, I definitely wouldn't. It doesn't seem like great negotiation skills, does it really? We'll leave it for a year and then let it raise its head again for the rest of my life. Yeah. This incident has defined and made this lady. Yeah. That is who she is. Why would she ever want to stop talking about it? I'm sure there's going to be a book, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. There is going to be a book, and apparently, as long as it comes out a year after the deal was done, that's no problem. So, I mean, search me.
If I was Prince Andrew, I would be looking at his lawyers and saying, listen, have you done your job properly?
Yes, I think.
But maybe I'm sure they have, and I'm sure they discussed all this with him. And he thought, "Listen, I need to put this to bed now. It's causing too much pressure, particularly to his mother. I just needed this to go away now." And then maybe that's the best deal that was on the table.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Well, Nick, listen, great to talk to you as ever. Have a good weekend. Thank you very much indeed. Nick Freeman, criminal defence lawyer there with some words of wisdom for Prince Andrew. I think probably sensible to take that advice. Don't open the can of worms. You closed it, and unfortunately for you, that's the best it's ever going to be.